Hello, and welcome back for some more Mechyard survival. In the last episode, we made a start on building a new patrol drone that's going to be slightly more advanced than the mech walkers that we built earlier in the series. And then when I was about halfway through doing that, we got attacked by a huge wave of drones. And they did a little bit of damage, and I have repaired all of it, I think. I've done a few sweeps of the base to make sure nothing else was broken, and I think everything's sorted out. So the new mech is back up to scratch again, and the repairs have been made on the squid as well. So I think back to where we were before we got attacked by drones. So for the rest of this episode, I want to continue working on this new mech to hopefully help us prevent situations like what happened in the last episode. And at some point I would also like to have a little check on my defense system setup, because some of you noticed, along with myself, that the missile system didn't deploy when we got attacked by all those drones. So I think I might have broken something with the controls, or I might have just messed something in general. So we're going to have a look at that at some point before the end of this episode. But first I would like to say a quick thank you to my channel members, and to our latest channel member, Marcus Retaken. Thank you very much, dude. Cheers for all your support. Right then, back to the mech we were working on. So we set up his arms last time, and they seem to be targeting pretty well. They're tracking me alright. So I think the next step will be to set up some on and off controls for the arms, and maybe set up some docking controls so that he can recharge and rearm eventually. And we should probably make a start on the AI controls as well. So the first thing we're going to do is build a bunch more event controllers. So we'll have a couple at the front for the AI controls, and we'll have a couple at the back for the weapons and the docking controls. And then we can get all of these welded up and start programming. And we could also do with naming this stuff so we know what is what. And we should probably take this opportunity to set up the on and off switch for the weapons. And we're just going to use a light as always, and make it a nice bright red to indicate danger. And that also reminds me that we should probably build a couple of lights on the arms as well, to indicate that they are active. Okay, so as far as programming the arms, the first thing we're going to need to do is make a group for the control units. And in fact, for the sake of ease and making things a little bit simpler, we will make an arm weapon group that will include the cameras, the lights, and the weapons themselves. And then we are going to need to make a couple of groups for our various arm hinges and rotors. So we'll make a group for our elbows. We'll make a group for the shoulders. And then hopefully, if I've set up the rotors correctly, I can just make a group for the rotors on each arm. And now if we go into our arm weapons controller, we can set it up to be an on-off switch for our arm weapons. So we can select our arm weapon active light, go to select actions, and then the first thing we're going to want to do is turn the turret controllers on and off. Then we can turn the AI on and off. So then we can turn that arm weapon group on and off. Then we can set the elbow rotors to -5 when the arms turn off, and the shoulders to +5 when the arms turn off. We'll do a little test now. Turn them off. There you go, they return like that. Now we just need to sort out the arm rotors. And we might even make those hinges move a little bit quicker, so we'll set the elbows to -10 instead. And the shoulders to +10. And now we should be able to program the rotors. And hopefully, because of the way they're oriented, I should be able to use the same velocity setting on each one. So we'll set the left arm to -10. And we'll set the right arm to +10 RPM. And then if we flick that light on and off again to activate it and deactivate it, there we go, the arms are in a nice default resting position. Fantastic. And now that we've got the arms set up, I think I want to try and work out what I want to do with this guy's head. I think for a start, I want to have a rotor right in the middle of his body. And then on top of that, we are going to have a hinge. And we'll quickly get those bits welded up. And for his head, I am not particularly sure what I want to do, so we'll have a little experiment with a few ideas. So if we put some of the small wedges, like that, maybe have a triangle under there, so the hinge has a little bit of room. And then we could put a camera on the front, and that way he'll be able to look up and down, as long as we give him a little bit of clearance underneath his chin. So we'll weld these bits up as well, and get them painted a nicer colour. And we'll also name them to make things a little bit easier. And while we're here, we will name the control unit for our head. So if we jump back into our control seat, we can get it all set up. Okay, so now we've got the rotors and the camera set up. We've got the azimuth and elevation multiplier set up. Everything seems to be working correctly. Up and down are correct, left and right are correct. And then we can tweak some of the head settings as we go. And then we can add a little bit of armor around this rotor to keep it at least a little bit protected. And then we can weld that stuff up. Then we could add a few more blocks to the front there, which lines up quite nicely with the shoulder pads we've already put in place. Then across the back we can have a few more of these pieces. And we'll weld those up too. And we could easily squeeze a 2x1 tip in that gap. And then around the back we can add a few more bits for his defensive AI block. And I would also like to try and give this guy a shoulder-mounted turret weapon. So we might cut that space out there and build a rotor. And I think I might actually remove that event controller and we'll put the docking control somewhere else, because I would like to try and route conveyor system into here. So we take that block out, add in a T-section, get that welded back up before we block it back in, and then we can add a sorter as a bit of ammo storage. We can have a corner block to bring it back. We can have another corner block to bring it back up again. And I think I might put another sorter there for a little bit more ammo storage. And then to kind of make it match on this side, we can have a cylindrical column to put our defense AI block rotor on. So we'll have a rotor there for the defense AI, and we'll have a rotor there for our turret. And then that is also going to need to have a hinge on top of it. Right, so we'll get all of these bits welded up, and then we'll move on to the next part. And just for laughs, I think I will build this guy with a shoulder-mounted assault cannon. And the turret is going to need a camera, and it's also going to need a light. And to control that new turret, we are going to need another turret controller, so we'll pop one in this nice little cavity just here. And then we'll get these bits welded up. And I have now set up the turret controls. I've swapped the actual turret controllers around. I've put the head one at the front, and I've made the one at the back the control unit for the turret. So that should all be set up now with its rotor, its hinge, its camera. It's got its assault cannon, and everything works. And it's all the right way around. And we also need to sort out the ammo sorters for the turret. So we'll set them to whitelist, we'll set them to assault cannon shells. Do the same for both of them. And then we can set both of them to drain all. And that way, every time it docks, they will automatically fill up with ammunition. And we're almost certainly going to need another event controller to activate and deactivate our new turret. So we'll pop one in there. And we're also going to need to replace the docking one that we removed earlier. So we'll put one in that side. And then we'll get these welded up. And then we'll get them named. And because I want the shoulder turret to be able to deploy and retract, we are going to need to add a couple more event controllers. So we'll just pop them in that side, and it keeps it kind of even with the design we've got so far. And like the arm weapons, we will also make a group for our assault cannon, our camera, and the turret light. So then we can go to our event controller. This is going to turn the turret on and off for us. And we are going to set it up exactly the same as the arms, and we're even going to use the exact same trigger, because I don't have enough room left in the arm weapon controller to do all the things I need to do with the turret, so we can just set up another event controller and trigger it using the exact same thing. Now, for this turret on and off system, we're going to do things slightly differently, because I want it to be able to deploy and retract and fold up and unfold and things like that. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to turn off the retract controller, and then we will turn off the deploy controller. And then on the next page we will do the opposite. We will turn on the deploy and we will turn on the retract. And that way, when the light turns on and off, it will activate and deactivate the appropriate controllers at the appropriate times. And then for our turret hinge and rotor, we are going to use the new rotate to angle actions. And we will set the rotor to 0 degrees. at 10 RPM. And then we will set the rotor to rotate to 0 degrees at 10 RPM. And we will set it to go counterclockwise. And then when the light turns off, we want to do something similar, but the other way around. So we will want to rotate our rotor to 180 degrees at 10 RPM. And we will set this one to clockwise. And then finally we can select our turret hinge one more time and rotate that to 0 degrees at 10 RPM. And now if I flick the weapons active light on and off, it should set our turret up for us. There we go, it's now in its forward position, and if I turn it off, it rotates back around to the rear of the mech. And so the next stage is we need to set up our deploy and retract controllers properly. So these are going to respond to the angle of our turret rotor. So we select the turret rotor in both of these, and so when it deploys, it will respond to the rotor moving around to less than 1 degree, and when it gets round to less than 1 degree, it will reset the limits on our turret hinge and rotor. So we will set a new lower limit on the turret hinge at -45 degrees. We will set an upper limit of 10 degrees so it doesn't just shoot straight into the floor. And on the rotor we will set a lower limit of -10 so it can't turn too far to the left. And we'll set an upper limit of 45 degrees so it's got a nice aiming curve on its right hand side. And then when it's done all that, we can turn on the turret controller and we can turn on its AI. And we can turn on the weapons. So if we flick that light back on, it should all swing round into position. And everything has turned on. And our new rotor limits have been set. And our new hinge limits have been set. And if we take control, we can move around nicely. And before we set up the rest of the retract controls, we actually need to go back into our on and off controller and change a few things. So we need to delete those two controls. And before we do anything with the rotors and hinges, we need to turn off the AI. So we will turn off the block, we will turn its AI off, and we will also turn off the weapons. And because I've had a few issues in the past with using event controllers and the rotate to angle function at the same time, when this one turns off, we are going to simply set it with a new upper limit of 180 degrees. And then we will also set the rotor to 10 RPM. That way, the AI controls of the turret controller won't interfere with our actions that we set on the rotors and hinges. And when we set up our turret retract event controller, what we want it to do is look at the turret rotor, and when it rotates round to greater than 179 degrees, what it will do is it will reset the velocity on the turret rotor, and then on the hinge we are going to rotate to angle, so we will tip it all the way forward. So now we'll do a little test at 60 degrees, see what that's like, and we'll make it go at 10 RPM so it's not too fast. And then when we turn that light off, it should deactivate, spin round, and retract back down. And if we turn it back on again, it should tip up and deploy and activate properly, like so. Fantastic. Right, let's have a little look at the angle it's retracting back to. What, 60 degrees looks alright for now, because I intend to pad out his armour a little bit more. So, yeah, I think we'll go with that. And now that one button activates all of the weapon systems at the same time. And if we flick that button off, everything retracts back. Fantastic. Cool, that looks like the weapon AI sorted out. So the last piece that I would like to try and add to this design is the balance control gyro. So we'll add a rotor and we'll throw a gyroscope on top of that. And for the balance rotor, we will turn on the shear inertia tensor. We will set both of the limits to 0 so that it can't move, because the last thing we want is this thing turning. And just to be safe, we'll set a little bit of torque on it, but not quite that much. And then we'll get these bits welded up too. And for the balance gyro, we will throw on the override controls so that it spreads its effect across that shear inertia tensor rotor onto the entire grid. It helps to keep the whole thing level. Well then, I think we're almost ready to start testing this guy. And one last thing that we need to build before we do any testing is we need to set up some controls for his AI modes. So we'll place another couple of event controllers to turn on the guard mode and the patrol mode. And then we'll get those welded up. And then we'll quickly get those named as well. And before we set up any of the AI controls, I just want to make sure we can get the AI working in the first place. So we will select our AI task block, which I've renamed guard mode. Set it to follow player, follow me. We'll turn the AI on. We'll select our flight block, which is now AI movement. Collision mode off, AI behavior on, speed limit 10 is fine. Set the minimum altitude to 0, align to planetary gravity, 0 roll and pitch angles. There we go, now that I've moved in front of him, he is attempting to follow me. Now you might notice that if I get too high above him, his AI has a difficult time figuring out where I am. And that is because AI blocks aren't as clever as they think they are. And basically, for AI blocks to function properly, they need to have thrusters attached to them, so they can figure out what direction they need to move in. But they don't actually need to check for fuel or anything like that, they just need thrusters that are switched on. So we can trick them by just placing hydrogen thrusters that aren't actually connected to anything. So if we then weld that up, there you go, you can see those thrusters have kicked straight in. He's now trying to walk forwards and probably trying to turn around so he can get to me. There we go, no matter how high up I go, he will attempt to try and reach me. And once I get in close enough, he'll stop. And that is him probably trying to get 20 meters away from me. And if we go back into the control seat and turn all of these AI blocks off again, I think we're probably in a pretty good place to attempt to cut him down and give him a bit of a proper test. So first thing, I think we are probably going to need to build him a little bit of a temporary loading ramp so he can get off the platform. And I think we might just have to cut off the piston head. Oh, there we go. We are free. Crack that down out of the way. He's balancing alright, even with all that weight on his back. Let's see if we can control him manually. There we go. Walking forward. It's pretty good. And we can control him with one of the gyros. In fact, if we take another one of those gyros and take it off override, that's a bit better. So I can hear a little bit of clanging while he's walking. There's a few things I think I need to adjust. I might also be able to speed up his walk cycle a little bit. But for an initial test, that's looking pretty good. We'll push all those rotors out of the way of the body. Hopefully that might help with the clanging sounds. Well then, that seems to be working okay for now, so let's do a little AI test. If we turn them both back on. Oh, there you go, he's kicked into life. Trying to follow behind me. And there he goes. There we go, he's doing a pretty good job of following us. Okay, well now that I'm pretty happy with how he's working, I think we can now safely do a whole bunch of greebling and make him look a bit cooler. I think to start with, I'm gonna move where these batteries are living. But I think if I replace the batteries more in line with the centre, we've got a nice little 2-block gap there, then get those welded back up, we can then do some more interesting and a bit more effective things with the armour down here. So we can have a couple of blocks like that. 4 blocks like that and that. And that. We can have a few half blocks across the front and a few slope tips covering those gyros. And we can do the same thing at the back underneath these rear thrusters. And then get all of that stuff welded up. And then for a bit of extra detailing, I want to experiment with a few ideas. So I want to try something like this. And then a couple of the sloped corner bases either side of that arm rotor. And then we can have some more armour slope tips and a few blocks behind them as a bit of extra protection. And then we'll do the same thing at the back that we've done at the front. And then we can get that welded up, see what it looks like. And then we could do a little bit of armour plating around the shoulders to give him some little shoulder pads. So I'll have one of those there and there. And one of those there and there. And then we can stick one of these centered half panels in the middle. And we weld that up and see what that looks like. Yeah, I quite like the look of that. Okay, well there's a few other things I'd like to try and get in here as well. I'd like to add a few more details to the back of the legs with a few of these armor plates. And I might even make them the same colour as the extra details I've been adding. Let's see what that looks like when it's done. I'm going to stick one of the new half scaffold blocks in there. And then we can weld all that up and see what it looks like. And then for these arm guns, I actually think I want to do a little bit of redesigning. I think I want to stick one of the big old-fashioned spotlights there and there. We'll copy the settings over to make things easier. Grind the old ones off. Weld the new ones up. And then on the sides of the arms, I want to add a whole bunch of these access panels, because I think they make quite interesting looking ammo storage type things. Right, that's those all welded up. Next, I want to try adding a little bit more detail with this white plastic armor skin and see what that looks like. So we'll have a couple of them either side. And then we can use some of the 2x1 base pieces. And then some of the tip sections. And then a few more of the tip pieces. And then we'll have a couple of the half armor plates again. And then a few more of the armor tips. We can fit a beam 2x1 tip in the gap. And we can put half armor plates across the top. And then we can have a little row of the scaffold blocks going across the top of the gun. And then for a bit of a more secure connection point, we can have some of the tiny little quarter panels. And then we can start welding all that up. And I'm going to need to go and get some more hydrogen. Yeah, I quite like the look of that. That looks pretty nifty. Might add a few more details. Ooh, I know what I might do. Might put one of these small access panels on the back to cover that up. And I might add a bit of armour panelling to the back of the arms, just for a little bit of extra greeble, and maybe a little bit of defence. And then we can do the same thing to the right arm. I think I might try and make both arms match, so we'll end up with an extra little gap of space in there. We might be able to fill with something. I think I might just put another one of those in there. And then we can weld all of this back up. We can even add a little bit of extra protection for the cameras. And then we can stick the armor panel slopes on the back. And then we just need to add those spotlights back into the arm weapons group to make sure they turn on when they're supposed to. So we will do something similar with the assault cannon. We'll have a couple of 2x1 slope base armor plates either side, and then a couple of the regular armor panels, and then some more 2x1 bases, and then we can have a whole bunch of half panels going up and down either side, and then we can have some 2x1 tips. And then we can have a beam block 2x1 tip. And then a beam block half slope. And then we can have another half block scaffold there. And maybe one there. So that we can have a whole bunch of them going across the top. And then right on the back we can have one of the little conveyor caps. And then we can weld all of this up. And then around the arms, I want to try and get at least a little bit of armour to protect these rotors. So we'll do some armour panels either side like that, and a few on the other side. And then we'll have a half armour slope in there, with a beam 2x1 tip on top of it, and a couple of corner 2x1 tips either side, and then a few half slope corner pieces. Weld that up, see what it looks like. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. Right, I think he's looking pretty good so far. Now, let's see what else we can do. Okay, so at the front here, I want to make a few little changes. So we're going to chop these off. And we are going to replace them with these blocks to give it a few more curves. And then we can add a few onto the sides. And then up here, we'll add a little bit more to this white section. And get these bits welded up so we can have a better idea of what they look like. And then down the middle section, we might put a few more beam blocks. And then I'd like some buttons and some displays on the front. So we're going to need a few more mounting points and a few more things to cover them up. I want a button panel there, and I want a display there. But that's not going to work with that, so let's cut that back and change the design a little bit. We'll put 2 cubes in there. Yeah, change it to something like that. It's not too bad. And then we'll get these button panels and displays welded. And we can sneak a few more beam block tips in at the sides. And we'll stick a few beam block ends in there and there, so we can still just about see the displays. And then we can add in some of our funky transition pieces. So we'll have that one there. And to help cover up these gyros at the side, we're going to need a bit of a mounting point, so we'll stick some armor plate tips on the sides of here. And then we can attach some of the bases either side of the rotor. And to prevent the mech from colliding with either me, buildings or other mechs, he's gonna need a sensor to turn his warp controls on and off. So I might just stick it there for now, and then we'll get that named and set up. Okay, so with the walk sensor, we need to turn it on, and we need to set it so that we can see the sensor field itself. And we'll bring everything down to 0, make it a little bit easier to figure out what we're doing. So top, we'll have that extend out 10 meters for now. We'll do 2 either side, left and right, and we'll do 1 meter above him. What does that look like? Oop, we're missing the bit below him. So if we make it 4 meters, make it 4.5, and we'll extend the sides out slightly as well. So we'll make it 2.5 either side, see what that looks like. And we'll actually bring that in a bit, so I'll make it 7.5 at the front. There we go, so when he gets to within 7 meters of something, that will trigger. And then what we want this sensor to do is we want it to detect players, small ships, large ships, stations, and when it detects something we want it to turn the walk cycle off and on, and we want it to turn the walk thrusters off and on. And that way when he detects something it should stop his walk cycle and should prevent him from crashing into anything. And then for now we will just fill these gaps in with some more armor blocks. And we'll add some more beam blocks down here. And then for our defense block, I'm going to give it a little bit of armoring up. I'm going to put a 2x1 beam tip on the back so we can still see the indicator when it turns on. And then I'm going to wrap the rest of it in armor plate. Then we can put a little bit of armor around these rotors. And then we may as well remove this control seat and all of these steel blocks. And we can add a little bit more armor to the back. And we're going to need to take out that connector and move it back a bit. And then we can place a sound block on the end of that rotor at the back. And we can use that to get the mech to make some strange noises. And then we can just put some armor panels up the back. And I might actually change the ones in the center to match the pattern that we've been going with so far. And then we can tuck in a few more 2B1 base blocks around the sides. And maybe some of the 2x1 corners. And a few 2x1 tips. Go, paint that. And that, like so. And we'll stick those in there. Like that. And I'll leave those unwelded for now, because we've got a few spare spaces for blocks. And I might need to make use of them when we come around to doing the docking controls. Okay, so we've made a lot of progress on the new mech. We've got his basic systems in place. We've got his weapon controls set up. We've got some of the rudimentary AI programmed, and I've set up some basic remote controls now, so I can move him myself. And I can activate and deactivate the weapons. So, next time we will come back and we will do a little bit more work on him. And we will potentially make a start on the docking port that he's going to need. And we didn't get time to sort out the defense system, but that's definitely something I want to try and look at as soon as possible. So, thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.